Hi, this is Rob Leo, and in this brief tutorial, we're going to take a look at Google Sheets, which is Google's answer to Microsoft Excel. By now, you should be well familiar with opening up a new tab, clicking on the waffle icon, and proceeding to Google Drive. From here, as with Google Docs, you can either upload a file, an Excel spreadsheet, for example, or you could create one from scratch. If you do happen to upload, as I have done here, you could take an Excel spreadsheet and you could either open with Google Sheets, or you could open it up with a double click and then open with Google Sheets here as well. A new version will be created, and from there you can rename it and then proceed to add your data as you see fit. You'll notice that there are some menu options right along the top of your screen, just like you saw in Google Docs. I'm going to create one from scratch. I've actually already taken the liberty of doing so. To do so, I went to New Sheets, and as with Google Docs, if you prefer, you could look from a template gallery. They have a bunch of options. If you look under General, you can look for grade books and attendance records, to-do lists and budgets and so forth. So again, it may be worth your while. I'm going to create a grade book from scratch. It'll be a little different from this one. You probably should use this one. It's probably pretty good. But I've made one from scratch. So I'm just going to go back to my drive where I've already created it. There's grades 2017-18, and my hunch is that you already have a gradebook program, but I already took the liberties of creating a list of names, various quiz grades, discussion grades, and test grades. Let's say, for example, that each of these categories are weighted. And before I get to that, you'll notice that I created a last name column and a first name column. I did this on purpose. It makes it easier to sort stuff. If you do have stuff that's in one column, you could go to your data menu and you could do split text to columns, and that will separate things based on a space or a comma so that you can kind of add a new column with the different strings of text. So again, I've just simply started off by making a column exclusively for last name and another one exclusively for first name. But let's say my quiz grades are worth 30% of a grade. My discussion grades are worth 30% of a marking period grade, and then my test grades count for 40%. I just want to come over to the quiz 3 option here, and I want to insert a column to the right, and that'll add a blank column. And let's say I just call this the quiz average. You may have need for spreadsheets, you may not. This is simply one way you could use Google Sheets. What I want to do is have Google Sheets automatically calculate the average for the 3 quiz grades that I had for the marking period. To do that, you'll notice that there's an icon here for functions, and I want to do an average of these 3 rows. So I'm just going to highlight them with my mouse and press enter on my keyboard. Notice it's taking the average of C2, that's column C, row 2, all the way up to E2. So it's also, the colon indicates that it's inclusive of everything in between. So C2, D2, and E2. I'm just going to press enter on my keyboard, and notice I have 87.33333. There is a way to decrease the decimals. If you look on the tools bar, decrease decimal places, I'm just going to click this until I'm happy with what I have. I prefer that this rounds up, so I'll leave 2 decimal points as that. Now I could do the same thing by going row by row, clicking on the function, getting the average, pressing enter on my keyboard, and again, changing the decimal places back to the point where I want them. However, notice that this cell F3 is highlighted in blue. I'm just going to put the crosshairs up on that bottom corner, and I'm going to drag down. And when I do that, it applies the same formula to all of the cells. So now I have a better sense of what the quiz average is. And let me just highlight this with color. Notice that I can select F as a column. I could select the entire column, or if I click away, I can just click and drag down and select what I've typed in so far for that column F, all the way from row 1 to row 11. I want to highlight this in a color just to differentiate. Let me make it like a faded red. And just a note to myself, I'm going to double click here and say 30%, just to remind myself that the quiz average will count for 30%. You'll notice that 30% did not fit into the cell. If I move the mouse in between cells and double click, it'll adjust the width automatically. I could also manually drag these if I wanted to kind of save some space. I like to double click in between cells where you get the arrows. That will shrink them automatically for you and make things fit a little bit better. This is especially useful if you have a lot of data going along the various columns. All right, so let's take a look at discussions next. We're going to apply the same thing. Again, I'm going to go to discussion 3 and insert a column to the right. And let's say I call this discussion average. And we'll also make this worth 30% of the grade. Manually type that in. And let me apply that formula one more time. I'm going to take the average, I'm going to highlight the various cells that I want to be averaged, press enter on my keyboard, pull down, and apply that to all. And then let's shrink the decimal places. In this case, they went all the way to nothing. Let me undo that and pick one that I want to apply that to. I just want this to go back to 2 decimal places. And again, I could apply that same thing, pulling the crosshairs up and dragging down to apply the same formula to all the various cells. Double click to adjust the width of the column, and then we'll do one more thing, average for the marking period. And again, this was going to count for 40% of the student's grade. First, and again, our function is to do an average. We'll highlight 2 cells that are included, and let's just, well, it's only a 0.5, so let's drag down and see if we have any more decimal places. We don't, so I think we're good. And again, let me just highlight and color things in. If you want to color the cell background, you could certainly do that. If you wanted to color the text, there's a little bit different thing you'd want to do. You just make another color here. Let's say I want to change the text color. See the A with the underline? You could recolor the text. So if you wanted to, you can kind of go through and manually highlight the stuff that people have done incorrectly. It looks like I made a mistake here. Alex did not get an 8. Alex got an 80. So we'll adjust that, and you can see the formula automatically applies. Let's calculate the marking period average. This time we're going to use a formula instead of the automatic functionality. What I want to do is apply a formula here, and notice 30%, 30%, 40%. I have to account for that when I create my formula. So what I want to do is to start a formula with an equal sign. And if you know how to write formulas, that's great. Not everybody knows how to use a spreadsheet and write formulas. You could go to the explore function, and you could ask a question, and Google may be able to come up with a formula that you could potentially use. In Docs, we saw Explore be useful for research by providing citations. In Sheets, it will provide answers to questions you have in plain language and may be able to actually create a formula for you. In this case, I know the formula. I'm going to start with an equal sign that tells Google Sheets that I'm making a formula. And remember, I'm working with columns F, J, and M, and I'm working in row 2. That's where my first student started. So I want to take F2 and multiply times 30%, 0.3. And I want to add that to my next set of data, which is the discussion average. In this case, it is J2 for Jeff Allen or Jerry Allenson. And again, I'm going to use parentheses. In this case, again, it is J2. Asterisk is the times symbol, and that's also going to be times 0.3. 30%, and I want to add my test average. In this case, it's in M2, and it's going to be multiplied by 40%. So M2 asterisk 0.4. And I'm going to press enter on the keyboard, and that will automatically calculate the average for me. And instead of reinventing the wheel, again, I'm just going to apply this to all of the column, and I will have the information that I need. In this case, I don't want decimal points. I want to round up. Hopefully 90 will become 91, 88 will become 89, 79 will remain 79. Let's see if that works. Sure enough, it does. And now I've calculated my marking period average. So spreadsheets can save you a ton of time. I know not everybody is expert in them, but nonetheless, it may be worth your while to check things out in terms of how to use spreadsheets effectively. I use it for a budget. I use it for sorting data and information. It'll become especially helpful when we work with Google Forms, because all of the data can then be gathered in a spreadsheet for easy sorting. Like other Google stuff, you have your file menu, you have your renaming, making a copy, revision history, and so forth. You can also download this to Excel or make it into a PDF. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for listening.